It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to today's show. I'm with, of course, the one and only Greg White for this episode as well. And Greg, we've got a really neat interview teed up here today where we're going to be continuing our collaboration with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. We've got two leaders within industry, two leaders within AME, and we're really excited and ready to pick their brains a bit, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I feel like I've known these folks. We've been talking about the Lean Summit and other events, and so I'm really excited to hear about this. You know, we've been looking forward to this for months, right?
Christmas
World
is here.
changed, as Joe just said. So
That's right.
I'm just glad we got to get together.
That's right. Hey, one quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoyed today's conversation, check out our podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. All right, so we've already kind of flipped the script. We've welcomed in Greg White, my fearless co-host, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, and trusted advisor. And we're going to welcome in our featured guests here today. So we're excited to have Lynn Johnson, president of the Southeastern region for AME and chair of the 2021 International Conference, which is another exciting event the AME team is driving. And Joe Barto, founder and president of TMG Inc. Great to see you, Joe and Lynn.
Really good to be here.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've enjoyed, so Joe, we met years ago through our mutual friend, Mark Preston, and it's always great to reconnect with folks doing good things out in industry. And Lynn, it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, but amongst everything else you do for AME, to be leading the charge for the 2021 event. It's going to be right here in Atlanta. That is exciting. So you probably have 3 or 4 full plates, huh?
I am super excited about that, and super excited when the opportunity came to lead the 2021 conference and having it in Atlanta with working with the team I've been working with in the Southeast region. It was, really a chance of a lifetime. So really looking forward to putting on a great show.
Love it. Love it. All right. So before we talk about the world of manufacturing and certainly all the cool things that AME is up to, let's get to know you, both of you, a little bit better. Right, Greg?
Yeah.
So, you know, we like really humanizing our guests first, right? So, Lynn, let's start with you. Tell us, where you're from and give us an anecdote or two about your upbringing.
Sure thing. So I actually grew up in Canada. Grew up mostly in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So for people here that may not know exactly where that is, if you were to start in Dallas and drive north, cross the border and go for a couple more hours. So that's about where I spent most of my life. I spent a couple of years of high school in Europe, in Netherlands actually, and so that gave me a bit of an exposure to, just different cultures and the different people you can encounter, and some appreciation for that. And yeah, went to school in actually Winnipeg, did that and moved on to Saskatchewan. And I think in terms of, just the world at large, after, spending my life on the prairies, I spent a year in St. Louis. So going down sort of from Midwest Canada to Midwest US, and then over here to Charlotte, where I've spent the last 5 years or so. So yeah, it's kind of my move around here.
This has been a common theme here lately. Greg, we had Jenny Froome with Sapix and Dominique Swinkles with People That Deliver, which we love that name. And they both had a lot of international experience in their upbringing. And it's I'm so jealous because I didn't have that in mine. It's such a great advantage. And Lynn, it sounds like, you really have leveraged that and really have enjoyed that aspect of your upbringing as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's, I think, people are people, but recognizing that, and I see it in my career as well, being able to recognize the strengths people bring to the table. And we're not all the same, and there's a lot of power in diversity.
Yeah.
Well, and that international cultural experience is so valuable because you can become so insular, even though the states are a vast, vast country, right? You can become so insular in just living in the States or in Canada or wherever you're from. To get across a border and to experience people in their environment is a fantastic perspective.
Yep. Well put, Greg. All right. So switching gears a bit. Hey, Joe, same question for you. Tell us about where you're from and give us some anecdotes from your personal journey.
Well, thanks, Scott, and same with Greg. Really, thanks for having me. I'm an Army brat. My dad was a career Army officer. I was born in Germany. We moved around a lot in my really early years. And then in 1968, my dad retired from the military and we moved to Atlanta. So I always call Atlanta home. And grew up on the north side there in Chamblee, went to Henderson High School. And was sports was always my thing. And all sports was kind of my seminal event, was moving around a lot, but also sports became a kind of a baselining activity. Everywhere you went, there was always some kind of organized thing. So no matter what the season was, that was what we were trying to do. And so
hey, you're a hot commodity.
Yeah.
I bet the phone doesn't stop ringing.
So so I played basketball, and some people say I was a pretty good basketball player. And in high school, I got recruited by a lot of places to play, and I ended up getting recruited at West Point. So
Wow.
Went up there, and to make a long story short, my first exposure to high performance teams and continuous improvement was playing basketball for a guy named Mike Krzyzewski at Army.
Coach K.
Exactly. So I always say that sports is the bedrock of continuous improvement. Because, not only are you trying to execute your plan, but the other team's trying to foil your plan. So you constantly have to understand where you're at, where you're going, make adjustments. And it goes back to this notion of teams, which is if you do what the coach asks you to do, you ought to win. And so it really becomes the responsibility of the coach to have a good plan, to understand where his athletes fit together as a team, how they match up with the other teams. So some of my earliest experiences were around how to perform as a high performance team. And then obviously going to school at West Point, I think the United States military has also been on the lean journey ever since they started.
Right.
Which is, what do you do? What are you doing? What's the plan? What are we going to do? How do we get better every day? And so spending a career in the military and learning how to lead and coming out of West Point. Then my second big seminal event in my life was leading soldiers in combat during Operation Desert Storm. Really, again, you're talking about a high performance team on the lean journey. So every day you got to stand in front of the soldiers and say, okay, boys, here's the plan. Here's what we got to get done. Here's what we think is going to happen. Here's what we've got to do to be successful. And here's how we're going to adjust as we go. So those experiences, and then spending 20 years in the Army, really positioned me to start the second half of my career in 1997 when I retired from the Army. And this whole idea of what it feels like to be on a high performance team, what good leadership feels like, is what propelled my journey in my post-military career.
So Greg, I think we're going to keep diving along the professional journey with both Joe and Lynn, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting how often you hear the theme from athletes that ties right into their core values in life. If you think about, in addition to what Joe has already talked about, if you think about conditioning and practice and discipline, those are the things that make you successful in business as well, right? You don't build a plan and execute it perfectly the first time. As Joe said, you build a plan, you practice it, you internalize it, and then you hope for the best and expect the worst. And if you've got enough practice and discipline, then you can do that in about any initiative. So let's do transition a bit to your professional journeys. Lynn, I'm interested in how you came to lead AME and some of the other things that you've done, and tell us a little bit about your journey as regards this coming to AME and dealing with manufacturing every day.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe just kind of taking a step back in background. So I ended up my schooling was mechanical engineering. I was always strong in math and science. I had a father that whose mother was actually a very strong woman, and my dad never had a question about women being equal and having equal opportunity. So I was always encouraged to do that kind of thing. And when a career in engineering was not something that was kind of pushed aside, but certainly encouraged. And that got me from engineering into manufacturing realm. And I've spent my career in a variety of roles. I've everything from kind of technical sales into kind of supply chain and logistics, scheduling and planning, and actual design engineering as well. So I've got a fairly broad perspective, and so I've done some of those things in my career and in a variety of environments. I've done everything from engineer to order, the one-ofs that we made, to some mass production. So doing some of those kind of things, and then kind of in that transition, I pretty early in my career, it would have been about 99, I think. I was working for a furniture company and mass production, and they were really seeing the pressure as far as competition from overseas. And so they needed to do something, and that was my first sort of foray into this lean, any kind of formalized lean program, lean journey. And it was really eye-opening. My first Kaizen event where we, offset a $500,000 purchase by a number of years just by, with a non-capital investment, just rethinking how we process.
So Lynn, real quick, for some of our members of our audience that may not be familiar with what a Kaizen event is, just in a nutshell, in a small nutshell, what is that?
Really, it's about, having a problem that you need to solve, bringing a cross-functional team together to look at it in a very condensed, typically a 1-week format, but you're full-time looking at this problem, looking at it from a different angle and coming up with solutions. So really that idea of doing some rapid problem solving.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's epiphanal for a lot of companies to solve a single problem and then to see the power of a Kaizen event like that.
Yeah. Plus the action, the sense of urgency, and almost the immediate results, and the camaraderie it can build because you're valuing all of those different departments, different expertise, different perspective from different walks of life. It's a wonderful thing to be a part of. So thanks for sharing some of that with us, Lynn.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that just sort of sparked it for me, and it was always embedded in the work I did, whether it was working in the design department or otherwise, that how do we apply this type of thinking, and how do we engage people in, which I think is really at the core in solving problems. And I was working a number of years later at a trailer manufacturer in Saskatchewan, and got to my first AME event. It was a regional event up in Canada, Edmonton, Canada. And I attended a workshop on total productive maintenance. And the fellow delivering this workshop was a fellow by the name of Jerry Wright, who's another AME, a longtime AMEer out from California. He had, at the end of the seminar, said, end of the workshop, he says, if you're ever in California, come look me up. We'll do a tour, kind of broad race. And I thought, that's nice, but we are in Edmonton, Canada. What are the chances, right? But I did approach him. I said, I have family in California. Not inconceivable that I'd show up at your doorstep one day and, I've given you the out. It's all good. He said, no, come on down. And, maybe 6 months later, I was visiting family and took the drive out and we spent 6 hours touring their facility, talking about strategy, how to deploy strategy. It was an amazing experience, and I think from that point on, the conference was a really great experience. But just that connection and how willing these people within AME were to share, just with no personal gain at the other end. I was sold, and have been volunteering with AME ever since.
Not just volunteering, but Greg, as we laid out in the front end, leading, and that's so critical in these in any association, but these volunteer-driven associations have folks that are willing to do what you've done, and lead big things, and probably some small things along the way. That's some of the secret sauce.
Well, look, I think we all know when you're talking about a volunteer organization, president might as well be president, vice president, treasurer. I mean, you do so much, right? You're head chef and bottle washer. You change the light bulbs, right? I mean, you take out the trash and you set strategies. So it is an all-encompassing job, and and we've seen the fruits of your labors via some of the AME vehicles, and it's been really powerful for a lot of companies. So really appreciate you taking that on. It's interesting, your father's perspective. I think when we approach things so matter-of-factly, right? You're just another engineer, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. You're an engineer. I think that presumption is very, very powerful. I've seen it in my family, both from female leaders who influenced me and influencing my daughters. And I think that presumption is very powerful. And if there's anything I would encourage people to do, it's just understand a person's gifts, whatever that person is, whoever that person is, however that person is, and help have them find their way to those gifts. So, all right, Joe, let's hear a little bit about your professional journey. I dare you to top that. So I feel like you can probably approach it.
I don't know. Lynn and I have known each other a long time, and I'll tell you, I think in life, it's these relationships that are really key, and when you bring like-minded people together, one thing I really love about it is we have such a good time. Common vision and running these events is not just running the event; it's building teams and putting them together, and it's really accelerated my whole professional journey at TMG. We founded it in 2002 on kind of a very interesting fundamental principle, which is, the TMG why, which is we help leaders who want to lead. Want is a big word underlying lead a high performance teams. It's so simplistic. Everybody wants to be on a high performance team, but a high performance team requires somebody who wants to lead it. And if you want to lead, then TMG's mission is to give you the courage to lead. And it's what gets us out of bed in the morning, is to take some tools that seem to be so intuitive, but if you give people a tool, you teach them how to use the tool, and they use those tools to lead their specific operation. And it's what I loved about my transition out of the military is, I guess, I got the coolest life in the world. I get to wander around America, and then in the last several years, Canada and England. I get to watch people build things, and it is the coolest thing ever. When I was in the Army, I used to love just go down to the motor pool and talk to soldiers that were doing what they did. And when you go down there and talk to them, say, how can I help you? And you have a meaningful conversation and you help them. I mean, it's not about, being better at the process. Is when you tell people you care about them and you actually want to give them a mission that's clear, and the resources and the plans, as you talked about earlier, Greg. It's not that hard, but you just have to do it every day. One of the things I learned from Coach K, and I'll tell you that I have a much better relationship with him today than I had in 1960.
I bet. After you've had some time to absorb what he was teaching you in terms of life lessons, right?
Oh my God. I mean, but that's also the characteristic of a high performing leader, right? I mean, we come to work every day to win. And if you want to win, I'll help you win. If you don't want to win, you got to do something else.
Yeah.
So it was never an easy situation, but there was always this fundamental notion that I care about you, and I see something in you that you may not see in yourself. And so that started this journey. Ours started in ship construction, new shipbuilding. down there helping welders get better at producing more welds every day.
Right.
And that just kind of morphed over the last, almost 18 years now, is going there and understanding that every business is really about how do I take a order and produce an invoice? How do I take a group of people, connect them to a process to produce a business outcome? Same thing that we did in sports and the military. You're constantly changing that equation, but it takes well, I think that leaders are not born. I think that you have to have a desire. Desire combined with tools gives you the courage to do what you've always needed to do to focus people out there. And that's been the associated with AME. I got associated with AME in 2006 via Newport News Shipbuilding, and it was really around the share, learn, grow. I mean, great leaders have a network of other leaders that they rely upon to help them do their work. And I think as you get higher and higher in organizations, we've seen this in a lot of our partners, they lose that network. They lose that group of people that they can pick up the phone and say, hey, I got something going on, because the higher you get in organizations, the more lonely leaders feel, I think.
Yeah. Well, the fewer there are people like you, right?
Yeah.
And it is hard, and it takes real effort to create that outreach. You're absolutely right.
And then you start drinking your own Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I guess I'm here and I'm really smart now to be able to tell everybody what they're supposed to do. And people aren't able to share and exchange, which is so powerful. I've been a champion of AME for 12 years, another great organization, subset of AME of more senior folks that meet a couple times a year. So to me, it's always about a learning journey for us. I mean, our business constantly has to morph. And even in the last couple months, you've got to recognize the realities. And I think that's a characteristic of high performance teams in the military or combat or in sports. You can't change the score. You got to know what it is. And you got to get focused on what do I need to do now to move forward, take care of my team, accomplish the mission, we continue to march. We've had it on my own team. We have 23 people on my team here today, and I have the same problems that my partners experience every day. My challenge may be unique, is that we're a virtual business. Today, on any given day, I'll have teams in 5 places around the country. Any one of those teams could put me out of business any day. So I've got to trust them. I've got to give them the tools. I've got to apply the same tools and principles on what we're doing in terms of a high performance team. And that journey for me is never ending either. So
every day is the NCAA tournament, win or go home. Right.
And what Coach K taught me was great leaders, you never get to have a bad day.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
I want to revert back to something you said about Coach K, recognizing something in you didn't recognize in yourself. And I'd love to pose this question to Lynn, the fellow you were talking about from California. Do you think that was the case? Do you think he saw something in you maybe that you didn't even see in yourself? Do you think that could have been part of that invitation?
Oh, I'm sure, and we're still, he's still very active in AME, and Gary Wright, he's an excellent trainer, excellent member of our network, and yeah, we still have a good relationship today. So yeah,
well,
that idea of having those mentors, yeah. And as Joe mentioned, it was a couple of years later. I think I met at another conference, maybe in Chicago, where Joe and I crossed paths, and it's just been I can't use another word besides blessing, all the people that have come across in my life through this network. And you talk about the volunteer roles, but it makes such a big difference when you have a team of people around you. And Joe is just a shining example of that. That pick up, do the work, and make life fun.
Yeah,
you can do hard work and have fun at the same time.
I was getting ready to do a workshop in Chicago, and Lynn was the room host, and that's where we met, and launched us on a great partnership.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. Because a relationship still, even in the digital global age that we're in, they're probably more important today than ever before. It's one of the constants in business and in life. All right. So if we can, I want to switch gears a bit because I want to dive into the world of manufacturing. And of course, we're going to talk more about AME and some upcoming events as well. So, just in the last few days, last few weeks, it's really been a mixed bag. If you look at a variety of the news, a variety of the metrics, there's always good news if you go seek it. Some of the innovation, I mean, we're seeing car companies, as we've talked about, Greg, jump into fight and figure out how to make not defibrillators, but Greg, help me out here.
Defibrillators? Boy, that's a hard word.
What was that, Lynn?
I think it's ventilators.
Yes, ventilators. Yes. Thank you. So
Yeah.
The levels of innovation, the practical innovation, and we're not talking cliche. We're talking, let's get all the smart people in the room, and we're going to figure out how to make this stuff in a matter of weeks, it seems.
Yeah.
These are remarkable feats. So that's some of the good news, right? And some of the innovation we'll continue to see is some of the good news. On the flip side, we know that with the quarantine and a variety of other factors, just overall manufacturing levels have taken a hit. We were talking about the German Manufacturing Index yesterday, which is a little bit dated, a couple months back, but the numbers just come out. It's always, kind of chasing where the activity was, but there's no shortage of exciting things to talk about when it comes to the world of manufacturing. So, Joe, I want to start with you. So when you are looking at the manufacturing world, when you think of a trend or a topic or a challenge, really your call. When you think of one of these subjects, one or two of them, what are you tracking more than others when it comes to the world of manufacturing?
That's a great question, Scott. I'll tell you, it's been our experience in a lot of connections. One of my oldest partners is with the Carlisle Group, and we do a lot of support to them on leadership assessments and things. And I think the reaction to this the last 3 or 4 months has been kind of falling in two camps. One is it's a crisis management. So it's all crises. I got to pull everything right here. We're going to lay off half our workforce. We're going to, slash and burn because we've got to get through the hard times. I was just having this discussion the other day. While cutting is hard, is painful, a lot of emotion, it's really not that hard to do. If somebody comes in and says you need to get rid of half your workforce, you got half your business, and those guys are going right down that path, which we have to survive. I'm starting to see some trends, though, even through this, of people saying that in the long term, great leaders have to look at this, that yes, we are going to have to right size, but we have to look forward that it is exponentially harder to double the size of your business than it is to have the size of your business. You following me?
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly.
While I come down, I've got to keep my eye on the big ball, which is when the business comes back, because I don't think there's structural issues in the economy. It's the short term. We know what caused it, but as things start to come back, the other thing I think we're going to see is obviously the services industry got killed, right? But in the places that I'm doing business and I'm interacting, you got two people living in the same neighborhood. If I work in manufacturing, I'm going to work every day. Now it's going to be different, but I kept my job. I'm working overtime. I may have gotten laid off, but my probability of going back to work where my services peer living next door to me. So if we're smart in the long term, we're going to see a shift out of the services industry back into manufacturing. Also, we're seeing a lot of talk now that this idea of doing work in China and Mexico and all over the place, and we're going to outsource that. We're starting to see a lot of people in the senior executive ranks say, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to start bringing that work back. So I think this could be a reshoring on steroids. and a shift out of the services industry into the manufacturing industry. But then it goes back to leadership.
Yeah.
When we start doing that, we've got to have a really good plan on how we do that. We've got to be really close to our customer. We've got to look at what the investment is. I've seen also too, another quick aside is, when you start to lay people off, there are two models. One is, I just look at all my overhead. And so what's in overhead? First line supervisors. And so you're killing the middle managers. Of course, you protect the hourly worker. One, they're cheaper, and two, they're doing direct labor. But when you get rid of that infrastructure, it would be like in a military unit taking all the leaders out and having one leader and 300 guys.
Right.
Then all of a sudden say, let's go do something.
Right.
And you find out that all that infrastructure is gone. You cannot rebuild when you lose that, because those great people are going to find other work and you're never going to get them back.
Yeah. You can't run the military without staff sergeants, lieutenants, captains, et cetera, right? I mean, you can't have generals and ground troops.
And you don't create them overnight.
Right.
Well put. Hey, if I can go back, because one of the places, and Lynn, we're gonna get your thoughts just momentarily. One of the places that certainly is getting a ton of attention is reshoring, nearshoring, just some of the sourcing decisions and strategies that already have been in review. Some changes already have kicked off, and we're going to see a lot of other activity in this space. To your point, Joe, one of the last surveys that Greg and I were reviewing a week or two ago was, I think, put out by Supply Chain Dive. 67%, I think, was the number of U.S. manufacturing executives do expect. I can't remember if they phrased it considerable reshoring, but certainly reshoring activity. And I think it's a no-brainer that we're going to see a good bit of activity, if not directly reshoring, certainly nearshoring and shortening some of these supply chains. However, what we've also heard, kind of going back the other way, Greg, is that China +1 or China +2 or maybe even China +3, where folks they're kind of hedging their bets a bit. Greg, before we get Lynn's thoughts on the industry, well, I'll tell you what, Joe, first, how does that, any comments that you want to share there about these sourcing decisions? And Greg, I want to get your take, and then Lynn, we're going to get your take.
Sure.
I contend that the biggest challenge that we have over the next 5 years is going to be in supply chain. The responsiveness to it, and our experience is that one of the challenges we have with the lean tool set is where do we see the mistakes of supply chain? We see them on the plant floor. I don't have the right material. I don't have the right specification. I don't have the right work instruction. We try to fix it on the plant floor when really the root cause is somewhere way up in the supply chain, a decision that may have been made 2 years ago. So now when you start to see 50% of your overall work being done by people that don't wear the logo of the plant or that prime, how they become part of the team becomes so much more critical here over the next 3 or 4 years as you reshore. So it's not just reshoring the work. It's then how do you do that? And it's not going to be by just hiring 500 more people. It's going to put more and more pressure on the supply chain, I think.
Yeah, well put. All right, so Lynn, I want to have you weigh in on your general observations when it comes to manufacturing industry. Feel free to piggyback on the sourcing, or you might have other topics that are front and center to you and keep you up at night, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I certainly if I were to say my top 3, I would say the sourcing, the reshoring, shortening that supply chain is certainly a big one. And it's been even before before 2020 started, it's been part of the big discussion, right? And I think one of the big challenges, and Joe had mentioned Newport News shipbuilding. I know Train Technologies is also very involved in this, but how do we skill our workforce? So how do we shift these people from the service industries, as Joe was saying, into manufacturing roles and skilled manufacturing roles? And I think that's a big gap we've got to close in order to be able to be successful. and, bringing that supply chain closer. So, and not to repeat everything Joe said, but certainly agree there. And the other piece around supply chain, I think, as well, is, all this disruption. So our models, our forecasting, our, even our lean tools that have been used, whether it's Kanbans, or how do we manage that through, the downturn we've seen recently, and then through this the upturn that's going to happen. As Joe said, nothing really structurally changed, other than we've had the pandemic has had a big impact globally, and this isn't an America thing or a North America thing. This is a global thing. As we come out of that, I think the ultimate demand for products and services hasn't changed. So how do we build that up, and how do we manage that?
You mean there's really not 700% more demand for toilet paper than ever before?
I can vouch for that with a closet full of Kirkland toilet paper.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to buy toilet paper for 6 years.
Exactly. Of course, I'm kidding, but you're right. I really believe you're right there. Accurate demand.
Yeah. So we've had, this bullwhip effect. I mean, the toilet paper is one I've been commenting on in sort of on a personal level for a while.
We all, right?
The net use of toilet paper has not changed.
Yeah.
Not by any substantial amount, right? So now that we've depleted the supply, and now are scaling up production, what's going to happen? Well, everybody's got a closet full of toilet paper, and no one's going to be buying. And so, so how do we manage? And kind of a I think an example everyone can relate to, regardless of your background. But I think we're going to see that across across industries and across supply chains as we're ramping back up. So how do we deal with that, I think, is an important question. And then maybe the third, kind of a third topic that I think is really important, and one of the tenets of Lean, is this idea of respect for people, and how do we, managing change through crisis, and, kind of thinking about people and safety. People don't have their basic needs met. They're, talking about that level of thinking, that we need for leaders, and for problem solving, for making change, for continuous improvement. When people are just really worried about how they're going to put food on the table or keep a roof over their head, engaging them in that kind of thinking is challenging. And it's not just challenging, but not appropriate, not respectful. So how do we kind of bridge that gap from where we are today, where people are maybe insecure and where they're sitting, and move through there, so we can move back into this improvement there. So kind of balancing that idea, I think, is a third.
Love it.
A third thing that's big.
I see a whole mini series based on what Lynn just shared there. But Greg, I want to get you, because there's a lot of real meaty topics that both Joe and Lynn have shared.
Yep.
That it's tough to really give it justice in a 1 hour interview where we're kind of covering a lot of topics. But Greg, respond a little bit to some of the things that Lynn shared.
Yeah, sure. Well, as it turns out, we talk about this a lot. And just last night, Tom Valentine and I were talking to an association of engineers from Georgia, and we discussed this very topic because it was top of mind for everyone: reshoring, nearshoring, China plus 1, 2, 3, all of that. And the reality is that manufacturing went offshore for a reason. We've got to discover and discuss and resolve those reasons if we want to get manufacturing back here. When we talk about manufacturing of healthcare, for instance, pharmaceuticals, we had a perfectly good model wherein Puerto Rico was one of the largest producers of pharmaceuticals in the world. And when those incentives went away, guess what? Those companies went away and they went offshore. So part of the discussion has to be that. I don't think that we will see a rapid and massive move to reshoring. We'll see a conscious effort at trying to supplant or augment production in China. And in order to do that, we've got to acknowledge a number of things. One, labor is too costly relative to China in the States to be able to approach it in any way. The average Chinese manufacturing worker makes between $10,000 and $13,000 a year. So we're not going to supplant Chinese manufacturing with human capital in the United States. That means we'll have to employ some robotics, which is beneficial in a lot of ways during this time of tremendous generational change wherein a lot of the baby boomer generation are leaving the workforce, and a lot of the analytical and technical workforce are moving in. The millennials and Gen Z are starting to move into the workforce. They'd like to deal with robotics, and I believe that ultimately we can augment human production with robotics on the appropriate things. Robots can't do everything a human can, but we can augment that, and that will increase the ability of human beings to use their minds, their unique physical gifts, and it will also apply safety measures so that they don't have to do the dangerous, mundane things. So I think when you kind of roll all that together, you have to acknowledge that what we would be attempting to replace is an 805 million person workforce in China, which is impossible for even the combination of nations in the world to do. So we have to figure that out as well, right? But there is certainly a lot of value in it, and there are some very, very logical, pharmaceuticals is just one example, but there is a very, very logical argument for doing it again in the States, not the least of which is the health of our society, but also, you know, national defense and national safety, of course. So I think we'll prioritize those things. We'll move some faster than others. Some will probably be more China plus 1, 2, 3, or nearshoring than reshoring. But ultimately, it will accrue to the benefit of the workforce in manufacturing.
And none of this stuff happens overnight. It's one of the things that I think consumers are going to learn, as much as consumers have learned about supply chain and all these industries.
Yeah,
we're big fans of the definition of end-to-end supply chain, which includes all of procure it, make it, move it, return it these days.
Yeah.
But you know, consumers are really getting more aware of all of that stuff. And you know, while a lot of what all of y'all have shared around reshoring and nearshoring initiatives, a lot of tough decisions lay ahead, and then you got to execute on those decisions, which don't happen overnight. So, hey,
well, it takes a plan, it takes leadership, and it takes discipline.
There you go.
Right? That's
right.
And coordination. So,
all right. So we're going to pivot in a minute. We're going to pivot to AME. But before we and talk more about, Greg's going to ask y'all more about getting involved and some of the benefits there and upcoming events. But before I do, I know that lean, first off, I've got a lean tattoo. I'm a big believer in lean when applied accurately and effectively. And something that Lynn shared at the end of her answer was respect for people. And, you know, lean when misapplied and when a lean banner is raised and other initiatives take place, it can be the boogeyman. And unfortunately, we've seen, at least y'all may have seen it as well, that as folks are trying to find a scapegoat for different things, toilet paper on shelves, other things, some folks have looked at lean as the boogeyman. And while admittedly our grocery supply chains are going to revisit some of their approaches they've taken probably in the last 5-10 years, and as every business will, lean, I'm partial, still works and works beautifully and masterfully when applied with the truest of intentions. So Joe and Lynn, I don't want to put you on the spot. Feel free to not weigh in, or feel free to weigh in right before we I don't want to use the pivot word, which we're hearing 20 times a day, but before we kind of segue over to AME.
Yeah. Take it, Lynn.
Sure. I just kind of weigh in on that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. This concept of lean practice, fundamentally, it works anywhere and everywhere. I've applied it in office environments and admin environments. You know, recently I was working with some of our dealer network in the Thermo King dealer network, and you know, looking at invoicing processes, and actually had the controller of one of our largest dealers come back and say, hey, what are you guys doing differently? Because I can see cash flow changes in the positive, you know, like, so, you know, it works in that environment. It works. I don't care what kind of business you are, it's, you know, it applies. And really fundamentally, like if you think about lean as being engaging people in, you know, making problems visible and engaging people in solving them. I mean, really at its core, that's what it's about. There's a lot of tools in the toolkit, some tried and true ones, and applying those. But, you know, if you come back to what problem are you trying to solve, and how can we engage people respectfully in solving that? how does that not work?
I'm with you. Excellent. Love that, because it can be for the people, and it's so important that folks get an accurate definition of what it is and how it's applied. Hey, Joe, feel free to comment.
I think it's a fundamental characteristic of a high performance team is I know where I'm at. I know where I got to get. How do I get from here to there? One of the challenges I often pose to the leadership when I work with them is, can you just work harder at your current process and meet your demand in the future? All of them are saying no. Prior to this, it was 15, 20% growth a year.
Yeah.
Can you just do more, add more shifts and get to where you need to be? So what do you expect the team to do? Well, we got to do something different. What is that? But I agree with you, Scott. I think lean is a way to think about the problem. When it becomes, oh, the lean person is here, you're on the road to Abilene. This is just what we're going to do today. Is we're going to do lean, and then we're going to go back and do our normal work. Every day, a leader stands up in front of his team in the morning and says, "Hey, guys and girls, today we need to make 10." They're in the middle of an improvement operation.
Right.
We've got to bake it into how we do it. And by the way, the benchmarks have figured that out. It's just how we do our work.
Well put.
So,
love it.
So I come from retail and distribution supply chain. So lean is not a core tenet of supply chain in that aspect of the modes of supply chain. But I think what the misnomer is, and it's been perpetrated by media. I mean, we've answered the question so many times. The question is, did lean fail us? And I think people interpret lean as scrimping on inventory, and it's not. It's simply, in one of my previous companies, we had this as a philosophy regarding retail and distribution, kind of a tagline, but it's not dissimilar with lean. No surplus, no stock outs, no surprises. It's as simple as that, right? It's just an efficient supply chain, an efficient means of getting there without excessive stocks, without risking too much to put you out of stock, right? And to even to confront some of those surprises. But as we've told many people, we didn't have a supply problem when this seismic societal disruption hit. We had a demand problem. As Scott said earlier, demand for toilet paper went up 753% overnight. Literally from March 12th to March 13th, demand went up 753% for two paper products, paper towels and toilet paper. So there is no supply chain of any means that it is efficient and effective in any way that can withstand that sort of impact. So I think we have tried to be very logical and factual here and set the record straight on what the real problem was, and also the order of magnitude that problem was, and the likelihood that problem will occur again.
Let me follow on with that real fast.
Yeah,
Greg.
sure.
I think today, and this is just an example of it because it's so big, that in a customer demand world, and that's what I love about lean, it's all about the customer. But today, and for the last 5 or 6 years, and I would contend for the history, it's the two biggest things the customer wants is, do I get it right the first time, and do I get it when I want it?
Right.
It's no longer about cost. I'm finding that if I know every time I get it, it's exactly what I want, and I have confidence I'm going to get it when I need it, cost is the third factor.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is why I think reshoring may become more important. I don't care if it costs me 10% more, but if I get it when I need it and I get it right the first time.
That's a great point. And we're gonna have, for the sake of time, we're gonna move forward.
Yeah.
But Joe and Greg and Lynn, we all know that a big factor in these reshoring decisions is, what does that add to the cost?
Yeah,
and in
consumer
some cases,
tolerance.
That's right. And consumers, I see it play out in, frankly, social media all the time, where folks, I've seen folks say, well, I don't want to buy the grill made in XYZ country, but it's $30 cheaper in some cases than the grill made here. And that's just kind of a random example, but it's an example I saw within a couple weeks ago. And, you know, we can't, it's very difficult in the laws of economics, manufacturing, have our cake and eat it too. So, but Joe, I think what you said is dead on, because if price is not the number one factor, and it is truly maybe in the top 5, then the appetite for reshoring and paying a little extra to satisfy those first 2 requirements, the environment is going to be much more ripe for reshoring and even nearshoring. So it's going to be exciting to see where we go from here. And I appreciate y'all weighing in on what's really one of the issues of the day for sure. And as industry enthusiasts, I know we're all looking forward to kind of seeing where it evolves from here.
So we've talked a lot about what you can learn from AME, right? And what you can experience from experience in manufacturing. So I'm going to flip this. I told you, Lynn, I would ask you this first, but I'd love to hear from Joe first and then have you give us some color commentary on that. As you think about all of the things that you learn and what you apply on a day-to-day basis, Joe, and how that impacts the businesses that you work with in your business, tell us a little bit about what membership in AME and the learnings that you gain from that. What does that mean to you and your businesses and the ones that you associate with?
Goes back to the mission: share, learn, grow. It gives me a network of people like me who give me an opportunity to think about my business differently, just as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I get mono focused as well. This is the problem set I have. So a couple times a year to be able to work with people. But also, this is the thing we struggle with too, is specifically with the COVID-19 thing. So I'll just give you a real quick example. We teach a Lean Six Sigma green belt, black belt program. Always been face-to-face, you know, because it's blended with the instruction, the project, et cetera, et cetera. And we love taking the projects out to the plant floor, et cetera. Well, March 19th happened. We couldn't do that anymore. So we had to pivot to a virtual platform. And, you know, we were able to accomplish that. But when we sat down and looked at what we learned was that if we hadn't had the first 3 months of face-to-face personal contact to build those relationships, we would have never been successful on the virtual side. And this is also one of the things about, kind of jumping a little bit to the Lean Summit. You know, everybody's going to a virtual environment. You know, we're just going to do this virtually. I contend, and I was a pretty big advocate, as Lynn knows, is I don't care if we have 10 people come to Atlanta. We're going to sit in the same room. We're going to follow all the rules. But having an opportunity to have a beer and talk to other people about what you're doing, and having that as a beginning of the relationship, not the relationship, is really the power of any of these professional associations. I mean, I'm the product of one of the most powerful association of graduates in the world at West Point.
Right.
I mean, but it's all leveraged on a common 4-year experience that sets the foundation for the future of that relationship, those relationships. And I think AME has a similar model for believers in this space. And it to also be kind of the catalyst for that thought, because you can't get it until you come to an AME event and you get that power of the people in the room, which is really what I think is what we're trying to accomplish as an organization.
Hey, and real quick, and Lynn, before we get you to weigh in, the Lean Summit that Joe's referring to is the AME 2020 Atlanta Lean Summit, August 10th through the 12th, which is open, if I'm not mistaken, to both members and non-members of AME. And it's been tweaked, as everyone would imagine, as any August event is, tweaked a bit, but very powerful relationship building, knowledge and best practices. Been there, been to a variety of AME events, and we're big fans. Okay, so Greg, we'll keep driving with Lynn's take, right?
Yeah. So same deal. I'd love to understand what you hear from other members like Joe about what they feel like they get out of AME, and maybe share a little bit about how you are going to translate that into this August event. I know it's it's been a difficult time. We've moved it. We've talked about it, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what I see as like one of the core values of AME is this idea of share, learn, grow, and the idea of practitioner to practitioner sharing. So there's a lot of power in addition to that network, and Joe's talked a lot, and I talked a lot about networking power that I experienced, but really that idea of not just learning something that somebody studied in a book or, the experts in the field, but somebody that's lived in the trenches and, fell in that pothole and stumbled and fell and got back up. Being able
so
to,
valuable.
Yeah, and it's, plant tours, or, going and seeing what's actually happening, going to the Gemba, or, where the work is actually done, and talking to people that actually do the work. My experience, and I think a fairly common one across AME members is, there's a lot to be learned from the people who do it really well. There's stuff to be learned for the people who are stumbling and fail, and trying again. And like,
yeah.
These are the 10 things I learned not to do. You don't need to try them, or like don't fall in the same trap as I did.
Yeah.
Let's all learn together and accelerate our journey. And I think there's that whole idea of especially as we're looking at rebuilding a lot of our economy over this next number of months. How do we accelerate that learning? How do we what's working, what's not working, whether it's in terms of supply chain, whether it's in learn best practices of keeping our workers safe as we come back in bigger and bigger force. But can we keep leveraging off of each other and accelerating that process? So I think that's huge. And I think, Joe said he's been adamant. We're going to make this event. We're going to make it a safe event. We're going to follow all the guidelines. We're going to, put all those things in place, which has necessitated us him and his team to morph what our summit looks like a little bit, scale it back a little bit, move it to August from, its original May dates. But I think there's so much value in that, having that personal connection and making those connections. And then, hopefully more people have a similar experience to what I did in my first AME event, where I made that connection. And, 6 months later, I have someone I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd really like to go see. Or, hey, I'm having this struggle. I remember you talking about doing something like this before. Can you talk me through what you did? I just immense power in that. I can't quantify how powerful that is.
Yeah. That's great. I think as younger generations come into the workforce and we talk about work from home and all these things, I think we have to put it in very relatable terms. And that is, when you really want to have a discussion with your friends, what do? You gather around a table or a bar or whatever, right? And if you want to have a really productive discussion with your colleagues, you do the same thing. You can certainly accomplish things virtually, but I'm rarely I am rarely someone who says this. There is no way to replace the interpersonal human interaction in idea sharing and learning and growing. There is no way to replace that in human to human interaction. We can add robotics to supplement human production, but we can't add robotics. I can't remember who it was that said this, but until you can sit down with a robot and have a conversation over a shot and a beer, there will always be human interaction.
All right. So go ahead, Joe.
At the end of the day, when you look at manufacturing across America, it's still a face-to-face contact sport down there at the plant floor. Now, a lot of the other stuff is not and could be. We were working with a company here that is more efficient in the above the shop floor things, supply chain, engineering. So they're reclaiming that space and making it manufacturing space to give them more capacity. Those are some really beneficial learnings.
Yeah.
My company, I always tell my people, and one of the reasons we don't have an office is because I don't make any money when I go to my office.
That's right.
The only way I make money is to go to their office.
I think that's a really good point. Is we tend to, in times of disruption and maybe even hysteria, we tend to talk in extremes. right? And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
The truth is there are jobs that are great for work from home. There are jobs that absolutely must be conducted in person, and there are jobs that, you know, could go either way, or maybe sometimes in person and sometimes work from home. So I think as long as people keep a proper practical perspective, then we'll be just fine. And the thing we have to be careful not to do is eschew human interaction in the spirit of trying to be efficient or helpful, you know, right? We have to recognize what those roles are that have to occur.
It's one of the things that I talk a lot about when I work with teams. You can't teach good judgment.
Yeah, that's right.
The other little anecdote I'd put in there is you need to be effective before you strive for efficient.
Yeah.
Because being efficient and ineffective does you no good.
Yeah, right. You're going the wrong direction as fast as you possibly can.
All right. So to wrap up on the AME Atlanta 2020 Lean Summit, I think there's 4 main aspects of the value prop there. I think of best practice and market intelligence sharing that goes on, certainly. The networking that we've spoken, if you have not seen the power of networking relationships and relationship building from the last hour, then you have not been paying attention, and you're going to fail the quiz that we're going to give out. But best practice sharing, networking, of course, great keynotes as always, and some, even though in the August environment we've had to retool plant tours, but as Lynn said, going to the Gemba is so valuable, and I'm sure most of the folks that make up our audience have been on plant tours. If there's a few of you that have not been on a plant tour and had that awesome, incredible opportunity, take advantage of it, whether it's at this event in Atlanta or one down the road. Did we miss any other really big reason to come out and be a part of the Lean Summit?
See other human beings in person.
World-class workshops as well.
That's right.
That was.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. So 5 big
That's
parts
why she's
of the value
president,
prop.
Scott.
That's right.
I earned my keep today.
Hey, she's got my vote. She's got my vote for sure.
No doubt.
All right. So we're going to include a link to our audience, a direct link to in the show notes to the event itself to make it really easy. Of course, we'll include Joe and Lynn's LinkedIn profiles like we do for most of our, if not all of our guests. We'll make it really easy to help you connect with an organization that we've really enjoyed networking with for years now. Okay, so Greg, as we like to ask all of our guests, beyond that kind of stuff.
The toughest question.
Yeah, how can, so Joe, start with you. How can folks connect with you and the TMG team?
www.tmgba.com. We're really proud of 2 things at TMG, and one is, and been in business 18 years. We've made money every month we've been in business but the first. And we have never submitted a competitive proposal. So our idea is that if we can help you, call us and we'll come up with a way we can help each other, and be smart enough to know that if we can't help each other, that's okay too. But we become part of the team, and it's about giving our partners the courage to lead, and we're really good at that. So
love that.
Awesome.
Joe Barto with TMG founder and president, tmgva.com. Lynn, same question. How can folks connect with you?
I think LinkedIn is the best route for me. So Lynn Johnson, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And of course,
I'm on my way there now, Scott. Hold on.
Of course, being a part of the AME leadership team, folks can also go to ame.org, I believe, if they want to join or kick the tires on joining or seeing some of the other stuff that, based on wherever they are. Our podcast, Greg, what do you normally say? We speak English in 120 countries, I think.
That's right.
That's
right.
Still that phrase from you?
It's about 160 now, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm learning Mandarin and I'm learning Spanish. It's a slow process. I'm a slow learner.
Got a tutor for you on Chinese.
That's right. But AME, it's a great organization no matter wherever you are. So Lynn, I appreciate what y'all both have shared, because we set out not to do an AME commercial. We set out to really have you both share stories and perspectives and from your professional journeys, and that illustrates in and of itself of why organizations like AME are so important. So really appreciate you both sharing. Big thanks to Lynn Johnson, President of the Southeastern Region for AME, and again, Chair of the 2021 International Conference, which is right here in Atlanta. You can find out more about that at ame.org. And Joe Barto, Founder and President of TMG Inc. You can learn more at tmgva.com. Thanks to you both, Joe and Lynn.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Great
so Greg,
perspective.
really enjoyable. Really enjoyed the conversation. Very frank conversation today. Greg, what was your one favorite thing from today's conversation? I'm gonna put you on the spot, and then we're gonna wrap.
I think the key that we talked about and discussed today is that human interaction is still the key, regardless of automation, robotics, reshoring, nearshoring, offshoring, China 1, 2, 3, lean, whatever the methodology is, people make that stuff work, right?
Yep.
So I think that's the key takeaway that I think people have to recognize here, and particularly in this time where we are so physically separated, right?
Yeah, agreed. The sense of community is needed more than ever before, right here today in this digital world. Okay, to our audience, thanks so much for joining us here today. Check out a variety of opportunities and thought leadership at supplychainnowradio.com, including a June 25th live webinar on ERP in the post-pandemic environment. A lot of companies are making a lot of tweaks there and adjustments, and you're not going to want to miss this insight from Rootstock. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. On behalf of Greg White and the entire Supply Chain Now team, Scott Luton here, wishing you a wonderful week ahead. Working together, much brighter days for everybody is certainly in the months to come. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now.
Thanks.